Colin Sanburg. Thank you so much for coming on the Inner Edison Podcast. I appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. All right. We were talking in the green room before we got going, and you talked about you were a serial entrepreneur, and now you have a company that you're a fractional CFO. Through the serial entrepreneur business, having the different companies on Inner Edison, it's about your greatest accomplishments come from your greatest defeats. And a lot of people don't want to talk about their failures. And I try to explain to people, you need to talk about it so people understand, one, it happens and it's okay. And two, sometimes it's cathartic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, we always joke, we laugh so we don't have to cry.
So
I've kind of screwed up every which way you could imagine. From being a CEO for 15 plus years, starting in my first business was a turnaround project. Buying into businesses and struggling with those transactions and trying to make those good deals out of bad deals. I mean, I could go on and on. We can go any way you'd like with it.
Well, the first one, the 15-year one that you were talking about, what kind of business was that?
Yeah, so it's a airport conveyor company. So we manufacture like what you claim your bag off of at the airport.
Okay. Do you still do that company?
Yeah, I still own it. I'm not the CEO, but I still own it. Yeah.
Okay. And what was biggest challenge that you had there that was one of the failures?
Oh my gosh, 15 years boiled down to one biggest challenge.
Well, I don't want to pick them all. Just pick.
Yeah, of course. So I would say, a huge breakthrough I had to figure out was being really candid with myself about the right people. So I made this mistake a number of different ways, but you bring people into your company and for whatever reason, they're not the right fit. It could be that they don't have the skill level. It could be that, they're very likable, but they're really not the go-getter that you need. Or you cut the other direction and you go find, somebody who's this kind of hitman for hire type. And the reality is they're terrible. They're just absolutely toxic to your culture and ultimately kind of turn your company upside down. So I've messed that up just about every way possible. That's probably the hardest one to get right from my perspective.
And was it easier just to hire somebody else to deal with that?
Well, I'll tell you, yeah. I mean, truthfully, like with my company that I'm working in now, which is FinElevate, my latest company, very first thing I did was found an operator. And I said, look, this is the dividing line of the business. I'll do this part, but here's the part I'm not going to touch. And a big part of it was managing the team. Like I love helping lead the team. I love being a good example of the culture. I love the rah-rah and that kind of stuff. I'll have the one-to-ones and kind of, help keep everybody charged up and pointed in the right direction. But I'm not going to come in and do the classic kind of management portions of it. And so, yes, finding one right person that I can oversee and they manage themselves, that's the way to do it.
Well, and I find that the serial entrepreneur, the entrepreneurs are horrible managers.
Yeah.
That's why and again, we all go into a business thinking, we've had to handle everything up front as it grows. But you got to find out what you're best at and only touch that. And, and that's the best way to have any company. And sometimes it takes years to get there. And then sometimes you get there and then things happen like interest rates go up 5% and destroy your business, that you have no control over. And, you spent years building it and now you're like, okay, maybe these aren't, I enjoy this industry, but maybe there's a better way to do this industry.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the path to exponential growth as an entrepreneur is through letting go of the wrong things and doubling down on the right things. And to the extent you've been able to do that in business, I would almost say without fail is the extent of success you've had.
Yeah, but how are you able to figure all that out? That's the $2 million question, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it comes from a lot of introspection. So, I always say the second chapter of an entrepreneurial journey begins when you admit openly that there are things in the business that you're not good at and don't like. And believe it or not, I mean, people can spend years in that first chapter fighting to just get to the point where they're willing and able to admit that openly, not just to themselves, but to the world. And it may be things that people think you're good at, but you hate them. Or it may be things that, you're really struggling and you're, like with the financial side, people struggle with it and they're insecure. they don't want to tell their team, I don't know anything about the numbers of the business, because now all of a sudden they're a fraud and then you start falling into that imposter syndrome. So they'll just avoid it as if people haven't realized it about them. And so once you get down that path, and I think put the introspection, work in to just say, like, of all the things, there might be things I'm even good at and they don't bug me, but I'm not going to ever be great at them. As I grow, those may not be first on the list, but eventually those will be things that I need to bring people in to do for me.
Right. And you have to figure that out. I mean, that takes time for some people, and some people never figure it out.
Absolutely. Some people struggle their entire career and never get there.
Yeah. And again, you should look at all this. That's why you need coaches, cornermen, or whatever you want to call them. Go to masterminds, figure all this stuff out so you know where you need to go in life. But I totally get what you're talking about, because I hate dealing with people.
Yeah.
I love clients, but I tolerate clients. You know what I mean by that? We need them. Customers aren't always right, but they're all we got. And, there's really good ones, and I deal really well with, because I enjoy asking questions and figuring out what they need to do. But to oversee employees is not what I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of us, especially kind of that classic entrepreneur type or serial entrepreneurs, we're very task focused. We're very goal focused. Like, I can paint in, 3D, 4K picture my vision for where I want to be 10 years from now, 3 years from now. Some other people can't do that. But at the same time, to your point, like, asking me in the here and now to be a good, consistent hand at the wheel manager that checks all the boxes and does all the career development stuff, you're never going to be satisfied with what you get out of me on that front.
Right. And it's okay. You just have to hire the right people.
Yeah.
And you have to hire really slow. And the problem is, we normally, as entrepreneurs, we need to fill a spot, and then we always hire. And if you hire the wrong person, it just destroys your culture, like you talked about. And then it takes forever to get rid of them.
Yep. It's a very painful mistake we've all made way too many times.
Yeah. And to a point where a lot of companies that I've seen lately have went more with, contract workers. I'm in California, so it's even worse here. Contract out of state, because you can't do any contract in state, because you are an employee, period.
Yep.
End of story.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And like, for us, I mean, right now, most of my businesses are B2B. Doing like big enterprise level stuff. Like, you're not selling conveyors to entrepreneurial companies, right? You're selling these to airlines and airports and just big stuff. But we are seeing that, I mean, in kind of this fractional, that's a little bit of a little off center of what we really do, but it's the closest thing that everyone's familiar with. But we're seeing that, where people are basically saying, like, I don't want to hire more employees. Give me a service. Like, let me find the right outsource option to solve this problem. I'm dealing with a company, and if I don't like them, I can fire them tomorrow, and there's no, fits being thrown or big issues, no legal ramifications. And so we're seeing that, I think, is part of this big trend that you're hearing about, a lot of talk about fractionals of all varieties.
Because, I mean, I think it's because of how I don't know how old you are, but it used to be, it was a privilege to go to work. It's kind of how people took it, right? And now it's, I don't want to go to work. Yeah.
There's a lot of big cultural shifts that are interesting.
I was talking to a guy, and he's like, people, and he was 60 something, and he's like, and he knows the difference between dealing with all the different generations and how to deal with them. And he says a lot of companies have problems because they don't want to change the way they deal with each of those. They think they should conform to the company. And unfortunately, that's not the way it is.
Yeah. And we're now of that age, right, where we're the old timers who are kind of looking back at these young kids going like, these kids don't work for nothing. They've been saying that for how many generations? So to your point, there's a bit of a life cycle. Exactly. There's a life cycle in the workforce. And, the reality is that's one more reason, right there. You can get people to wake up in the morning and be excited about the different marketing technology that's coming out, or whatever, AI. Getting me up in the morning and trying to get me excited about, understanding the multi-generation workforce and how to build the right culture around those dynamics, man, you lost me. I'm going to be off by myself reading about finance or strategy or something.
All right. So we talked about your conveyor belt business. And then how long's Fin Elevate's been around?
It's been around about a year, not quite a year and a half.
What got you to start a fractional CFO?
So yeah, never something I thought I would do. Interestingly, I was had experience buying businesses, and so that was my original goal, was to buy another business. I'd worked my way out of my other businesses. They were pretty much self-managing, have CEOs in place, and I was kind of this quasi holding company, and said, the next thing is going to be, I'm going to go buy another business, and I really do believe in that model. We could talk about that all day, but interestingly, there was not a business that fit the description I decided that I was looking for. And at the same time, what I recognized in my own, role within my companies is that I was basically playing this kind of fractional CFO role for my own companies. And, I'd bring in CEOs or management teams, and I'd have this whole idea of strategies we could do. And I'd have stuff on the whiteboard, and we'd paint this big picture, and then they'd go back and there was no execution. And the reason was because they were off dealing with employees and clients and vendors and projects, right? They were dealing with the product and all the other things. And so what I came to the realization was that, what companies don't need, what my companies even didn't need, was just a bunch of big ideas, like highbrow, here's a big overarching 3-year strategy we could implement. What they really need is help, like fixing their cash flow and help grinding out more profitability, because that is a grind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially when I started to build this kind of solution for myself, what I realized was, like, they don't need more of me. They need more at the other layers of the organization to help actually implement improvements. And knowing a bunch of entrepreneurs, I was like, well, if I'm struggling with this and I'm kind of a financially oriented entrepreneur, the other ones don't have a shot. Like, this is way outside of what they're interested in. This is like when you and I talk about managing people, right?
Right.
And so it was kind of this light bulb went off, and I was like, wait a minute, the business that makes all the sense in the world is kind of this behind the scenes, version I'd built for myself. And so we just essentially packaged it up and started, working with other entrepreneurs that I was friends with, and turned it into a real business.
Because I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between a bookkeeper, CPA, and then your CFO. The CFO is the actual person who, this is our vision going forward. The other two is like looking at stuff after they already happened.
Yeah, exactly. I would describe it as like your bookkeeper is just recording what already happened. Then your CPA is hopefully what they're recording is that you made a lot of money, and now the CPA is helping you pay as little tax as legally possible based on the money that the bookkeeper recorded. But who's got the plan for next year and the year after that, and where we're headed? And when the CPA says, I'm looking here, and it looks like based on your industry, maybe your labor is a little high. Okay, but what are you going to do about that? The vast majority of us have that meeting, and the best CPAs say something like that. And then we go, oh yeah, I'm gonna get on that. And then you go back to work, and it's client meetings, and the team wants this, and one-to-ones, and somebody's anniversary is coming up. And man, it's the last thing on earth you're thinking about is what that CPA, this little offhanded comment about your labor being a little high. We're the firm that is actually in the business week to week, helping people figure out a strategy around their labor, or what are we going to do to speed up collections? And you don't have a cash flow forecast, but you're panicking about cash every time we talk. Let's go build a forecast. Let's actually run the forecast and manage it. And so those are the kind of things we do in the business on a week-to-week basis. So the bookkeeper can keep recording. We do a little bit of that, but we don't do a ton of bookkeeping, but we do a little bit for clients of helping that, or overseeing it, making sure it's being done well.
Yeah, I think that's the bookkeeping. I think is one of the biggest challenges for most companies, finding a good bookkeeper. I'm in Modesto, California. I don't know where you're at, but we've had 2 major thefts in companies. One was a marketing lady for $1 million, and then another one was the actual company CPA, supposedly, and financial person for the last 6 years, took about 1.8 million. Came up with their own companies and would be paying the companies.
Yep, the phantom vendor game. Yeah. Yeah, that unfortunately is incredibly common. And interestingly, I told you, my first business was kind of a train wreck when I started in it. And I was not one of the founders of the company. I ended up buying the company after being there for about 5 years. I took over as CEO and then bought it over several transactions, bought out the former owners. And our very first employee, the very first person in my life I ever fired was someone who had been embezzling from my first company that I still own. And it was discovering, and this was kind of my rude awakening to the financial side of business, because I wasn't, I'm not a CPA. I wasn't this classically trained accounting person. I dug in because that was the part of the business that was clearly killing us the fastest. And the very first thing I saw is, I'm like, man, this doesn't make sense. Like there's a lot of weird stuff going on here. And, it could just be incompetence, but it seems to be a theme here. And so anyway, digging deeper and ultimately discovering, it was a 6-figure. It wasn't those numbers, thankfully, because that would have definitely killed the company.
Yeah.
But it was
that was
6
over
figures.
a 5-year period. That one, the first one, and the second one 6 years. That's just a lot. So
yeah. And it's always the same games, right? It's like paying yourself. It's using the credit card inappropriately. It's like, and a lot of times, interestingly, because I've taught, from telling my story, you always find other people go, oh my gosh, I got a, friend, their company. Here's what happened. It is almost always they dip a toe in the water. Nobody notices. They go a little further. Nobody notices. They go a little further. And they just like, they figure it out. And once they run it, they're greedy, or they wouldn't be doing that in the first place. And they just go crazy until the day they're caught. And it just seems to be, that's always the story.
Yeah. So both of them are, going to be prosecuted. Thank God.
Well, I'll tell you, the really scary part is this person stole 6 figures from us, and they could not be prosecuted because we did not have appropriate controls in place prior to me doing this. You think it's not a big deal to have an employee handbook, or you think it's not a big deal. Like, well, this is my bookkeeper. Like, I need to give them signature on the checks because sometimes I travel and we still need to be able to pay vendors. You've now opened up permissions to where all they have to say is like, well, I thought it was okay. I thought it was understood. This is what I was doing. So buying your groceries at Walmart with the company credit card, you thought that was okay? Yeah, I thought that was acceptable. I mean, I bought groceries I took to the company, and I think maybe the boss took some of them home. What's the difference?
Right.
I was told
it was okay. And that was the one thing about the marketing person, right? This company was, I'm not going to get into the type of company, but basically it was kind of a, I don't want to say Animal House, but basically that's what it, because we did a bunch of stuff, and I know she could just come back and say that was the environment we're in, or he attacked, they come up with something to get away with it. So
yeah, and that's it, right? At the end of the day, something stolen from a small business, like how far are you willing to take that, right? You can you can turn over all the information, but we called the authorities and they were kind of like,
yeah,
let's be honest. It's like you called me and told me that somebody stole your bike. Like, sure, we're going to get right on top of that.
But the other thing, a lot of bookkeepers do is not pay stuff. Like, they forget, they don't pay your payroll taxes, or they don't pay this, and then they leave because whatever. And then all of a sudden you think everything's good. And then you're getting some knocks on the door about, hey, you're behind on your payroll taxes. This is what.
Yep. Yeah. And the interesting part everybody needs to remember is like, you're still liable for that. Like, just because someone else
liable.
Exactly. Just because you empowered someone who is incompetent does not give you any sort of cover whatsoever. Like, you are just as liable as if you had been the one who was responsible for doing it yourself.
Right. And again, when I say personally, because if you're owner of the corporation, you are still liable for those taxes, because the payroll taxes, are totally different world. So,
yep, absolutely.
And you can tell I've had some fun with this.
Yeah, you've seen some things.
Because you do, people are, and I tell people, you can't get pissed off about it, because people are people. That's how human nature is. People are going to do whatever they're going to do. You have to protect yourself to not get hurt that bad. So never allow one single signer on a check in your company. If you should have double signatures. I'm the president of my Rotary this year. I don't sign on any check. I sign the thing that this is okay to go forward. And then we have the treasurer who signs on the checks. Right.
Yep.
And I know him. He's been doing it for years. We've never had an issue. Now we have somebody else coming in, and you never know that going forward. So.
Yeah. But to your point, having that, being able to tie it back is the only way to run any kind of professional organization. But it's amazing how many people cut those corners, because there's that one day where we're busy or one emergency check's got to go out and people start relaxing the standards. And next thing you know, it's kind of the Wild West. And then they're shocked when the money's gone.
And then and then they recover from that and the other stuff from that. There's a lot of stuff that you could, you do everything you think is going the way it's supposed to be going. You check and you think so, and then all of a sudden it hasn't been, because we're as owners, you're busy doing so many things. That's why you hire other people to handle certain things for you, but you can't just think they're handling the stuff. You have to verify.
Yeah, I love that. Trust but verify, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not doing either of those, you're pretty limited.
Wrong, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. And interestingly, I mean, I kind of talked about the hardest thing I've dealt with as a CEO was around hiring some of the wrong people. I mean, it's similar. It's amazing how many people know that their bookkeeper isn't doing a great job. They know that somebody on their team isn't really getting it done, but it's like, it's not my biggest problem today, so I'll just keep kicking that can down the road. And it's like, man, there's some of those where that smoke you were seeing that you assume was fire, but it wasn't an inferno yet, so you weren't going to mess with it, is them stealing from you, is them forgetting to pay things that, like you said, cause a legal liability, is them forgetting to collect, or, I never sent that invoice, and so the customer never paid us. And now that money just disappears. You did all the work, you paid the people to product or service or whatever it is, and we just never invoiced, and it just fell off the radar.
Right. I mean, because there are companies who send in the way they're set up, how they send out invoices to get paid. They send them in the mail, but they send them to the wrong. Like I had one that was sent it to the wrong address. I'm like, I never received it. Why aren't you emailing it? Why aren't you doing something else? I haven't been at that address for 3 years.
Yep.
It's like, and then they never followed up with a new one.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. And unfortunately, as we all know, now that we're morphing into this much more digital kind of world, oh my goodness. I mean, the stuff that we're seeing and hearing related to theft and fraud and just all of the crazy scams that are happening.
What are you talking about?
So say that again.
What are you talking? What are you talking?
I mean, so we're seeing stuff where people are getting their email hacked into, for example, and then they're using that email address and they're sending out stuff to your vendor or to your customers saying, hey, you owe this amount. I mean, we saw one. So a charity that I personally support, and my wife is actually the chair of, they had a situation where a company they were working with, very up and up company, sent them a payment request and said, hey, based on this bill that you have due, here's the valid amount. Here's the valid bill number for this thing that's real, that everyone knew was the real deal. Go ahead and click this link and make the payment. And it was someone else, a scammer, changing the payment information. So a legitimate payment from a legitimate company, thinking they're sending it to their vendor for the exact amount that they were aware of for the real purpose, gets diverted into, someone else's account.
Right.
And that stuff's like rampant. I mean, it's just everywhere. So if the days of thinking the business owner, and as long as I trust Sally, like we're good, man, you are not even in the right ballpark anymore for what's out there and the way you have to kind of approach your business.
Because I'm in the mortgage, and so there's people have been taking over escrow companies' emails, and people wiring money to the wrong account. There was a person in San Diego, was $683,000. Yeah, it's like, get the actual piece of paper, go in there, get the information wired directly. Do not take anything from an email, or it has to be a secure email and then you call and verify.
Exactly. Yeah. The big one to me, and that's what I always tell people, you want the simplest thing you can add. You need to independently find that phone number meaning through Google or through something that is not coming from that email or coming
Right.
from, and you need to call and make sure you get a voice that you recognize, and that's the way you verify the information. Because have even seen it where that fake email going through has a dummy phone number on it, like please call to verify, but it's
Right.
not the real number, right? And so I mean, to your point, I just went through that myself with buying a house, and you go to send that wire, and man, I was calling the bank. I mean, I was almost freaking people out with how many times I was calling to check and double check. But I mean, once it's gone, it's gone. And a
And
lot of these banks
they
will
ship
tell
it
you.
out. Yeah, they ship
Yeah,
it out. I mean, as soon as they go, as soon as you send it, it's out of that account into multiple accounts, and they can't follow it. And but
exactly.
yeah, and
Yep.
overseas accounts that you
Of
can't get
course.
access to, of course.
Yep.
But that's why you have to verify everything you do. And I don't trust. That's why I tell people, don't trust the email situation, but you can send an invoice going, hey, you owe this. And then you can call and verify, not use, and then, go directly to their site with a payment stuff. There's ways, just make sure you
Yeah.
tell people, or, I like secure email, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
have a
Absolutely. Yeah.
separate system that's very secure that you have to log into. And that's like, we're Doculus. I'm not even talk today. We're Docless on our stuff, but people still send in documents, and I send them. I have an offsite iCloud thing that through the server that's protected, and they upload it through there, because I do not want it coming through my email, through any of my stuff, because they can steal so much information. When I was
Yep.
first in this industry in the 90s, when we were done with a file or it canceled, we threw it in the trash. How do you think they started the identity theft? They would go through banks, uh, trash cans to get the files out with everybody's information in it. They didn't even shred it back then.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. It was like, we don't have files these days. So it's not the same way, but
I,
just what we used to do that nobody thought about,
yeah. I mean, it's a miracle if any of us have anything that hasn't been compromised, right? Because I remember that. I remember thinking years later, I found this old box that had like my high school ID, like high school badge or whatever, and had my social security number right there on it.
Right.
Like, wait a minute. He just printed it on the front, but that was the days. I mean, 80s and 90s, I didn't care about that kind of stuff. It wasn't
No,
really thought of like it is now.
I mean, and it's when you're in the military, it's your ID. Really? You're putting my social security number on everything?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Colin. How do people find you if they want to, get you for a CFO, fractional CFO?
Yeah. The easiest way, I mean, you can go to our website. It's just finelevate.com, or, look me up on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. And, again, I said, I was selling to enterprise companies, and I'm not trying to beat up on those companies because some of them are still customers. But, I can't really relate. That's not really my vibe. I'm so much more of an entrepreneurial company focused guy. Like, I've just always been in mastermind groups, what I love. So just for everybody listening out there, just because we interact doesn't mean I'm going to be trying to hard pitch you and sell you something. Like, life's too short to try and make a buck off of everybody you ever meet. I just love getting to connect with different entrepreneurs and meeting people. So yeah, reach out. I would love to connect.
Yeah, Colin, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I had a good time with you. I
Yeah.
wanted to get into the other stuff about, buying businesses, because that's a great subject, but that would be another 45 minutes to an hour. So
I know. Yeah.
we'll have
That's
to
not a
do
small
another
one.
one. Yeah, we'll have to do
Let's
another
do
one.
it.
All right, Colin, thanks again for being here, and everybody, thank you for listening. Make it a great day. Thanks, Colin.